If I asked you what makes humans special, you might say our big brains, or our tools, or our ability to walk on two legs. But here's the truth. None of those things are unique. Elephants have bigger brains. Monkeys use tools. Birds walk on two legs. The real superpower, the one thing no other animal can do, is something invisible. It's something you use every day without thinking. And once you understand it, you'll understand everything about human history.
Hi everyone, welcome back to 10 Minutes with Jojo. As we have covered our first book, The Compound Effect, you can find the link in description. Today we are going to start an interesting book summary, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
So we really got to ask ourselves, what exactly is this invisible superpower? How in the world did a completely underdog ape, just kind of chilling squarely in the middle of the food chain, suddenly rise up and conquer the entire planet? It's a massive mystery, right? And to solve it, we need to go back, way, way back. Which brings us to part 1, animals of no significance. Look, if we really want to understand our rise to the top, we have to first accept our incredibly humble beginnings. For millions of years, early humans were literally just another animal out there on the savannah. The very first humans evolved around 2.5 million years ago. They eventually wandered over to Eurasia about 2 million years ago. But honestly, for the vast, vast majority of this timeline, we were solidly stuck in the middle of the food chain. We gathered plants, we scavenged leftover bone marrow from lion kills, and we basically lived in constant everyday fear of larger predators. We originally had no more impact on the environment than, say, a firefly or a jellyfish. Zero. Other top predators, like sharks, well, they evolved to the top over millions and millions of years, which allowed the whole ecosystem time to balance itself out. But us, we jumped to the top so incredibly fast that neither the ecosystem nor we ourselves actually had time to adjust. We're basically the biological equivalent of a banana republic dictator. We just recently seized power, and because of that, we are full of deep-seated ecological anxieties and fears. And you know what? That makes us incredibly dangerous. Let's move on to part 2, our hidden human siblings. Okay, prepare to have your entire view of humanity totally shattered. Earth actually used to be fully populated by multiple, distinctly different human species at the exact same time. It was not just a straight single-file line of evolution like you might think. Depending on the environment, our ancestors adapted in completely different ways. Adapting to the freezing snowy forests of Europe, that gave us the muscular, cold-adapted Neanderthals. Over in Eastern Asia, we had Homo erectus, the most durable of the bunch. On a tiny island in Indonesia, a total lack of resources created a dwarf human species called Homo floresiensis. And meanwhile, our particular species, Homo sapiens, the wise man, was quietly evolving over in East Africa. Just contrast ourselves for a second with our most famous siblings, the Neanderthals. They were bulkier, way stronger, and get this, they actually had larger brains than we did. We were physically much weaker. And the genetic gulf between our two species was just wide enough that if, say, a Neanderthal Romeo and a Sapiens Juliet fell in love, they likely couldn't successfully merge their populations with fertile offspring. We were definitively distinct species. All right, part 3, the cost of thinking. So if Neanderthals were literally stronger and had bigger brains, why on earth did we win? Well, it all comes down to a really tricky biological trade-off. Your brain makes up only about 2 to 3% of your total body weight, but it drains a massive 25% of your body's energy when you're just sitting there resting. For other apes, it's only 8%. Evolutionarily speaking, hauling around a massive brain is actually a massive liability. We literally had to divert energy away from our biceps just to power our neurons. Human brain growth was just exponential. We went from a 200 cubic centimeter baseline, which is standard for similar-sized mammals, up to 600 for early humans, and then skyrocketing all the way to 1,300 for modern sapiens. But here's the catch. To sustain this kind of crazy biological hardware, our ancestors desperately needed a secret technology to fuel it. And that secret technology, it was fire. When humans figured out how to domesticate fire, they could finally cook. And cooking essentially pre-digests your food outside of your body. This was a total game changer because it allowed our bodies to drastically shorten our intestines. You see, long intestines and large brains are both massive energy hogs. You simply can't afford to have both. So by shrinking our gut, cooking literally paved the biological way for those jumbo brains of ours. Which brings us to part 4, the cognitive revolution. But having a big brain alone just wasn't enough to conquer the globe. The real turning point happened around 70,000 years ago when Sapiens suddenly experienced this massive explosion of technological and social expansion. I mean, we surged out of Africa, rapidly drove the Neanderthals to extinction, miraculously crossed the open ocean to settle Australia, and invented boats, bows, arrows, and art. This was the exact moment when our history totally broke free from the slow, dragging constraints of biology. So, the absolutely crucial question is, what actually changed inside our brains 70,000 years ago? The answer? Language. But I'm not just talking about making sounds. A monkey can totally warn its troop by screeching, "Careful, a lion!" But the cognitive revolution allowed sapiens to say something entirely, profoundly different. We could say, the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe. Think about that. We shifted from merely describing physical reality to describing things that don't even exist at all. This new, incredibly supple language was the ultimate superpower. It gave us the ability to gossip. And yeah, I know that sounds kind of trivial, but gossip is actually essential for human survival. It allows us to track really complex social relationships, to figure out who to trust, who's a cheat, and as a direct result, it let us build much larger, tightly cooperative bands. However, gossip has a hard biological limit. Sociological research actually shows that the maximum natural size of a group bonded purely by gossip and intimate acquaintance is about 150 individuals. It's known as Dunbar's number. Once a group gets larger than 150, things just destabilize and fall apart. You simply can't run a sprawling city or a massive empire just by knowing every single person personally. So let's look at part 5, the power of fiction. So how in the world did we cross that 150-person threshold to build cities of millions? Sapiens did it by creating shared fictions. Large numbers of complete strangers can cooperate successfully only if they believe in the exact same imagined realities. Think about it. Gods, nations, human rights, laws, money, corporations. None of these things actually exist in the physical world. They have no mass, no biological reality. They exist entirely within the stories we invent and tell each other. And the origins of this incredible power date back tens of thousands of years. Take the Stattle Cave Lion Man, for example. It was carved over 30,000 years ago. It's got the body of a human and the head of a lion. This is one of the very first indisputable pieces of evidence that human beings could imagine the unreal. Ancient tribal shamans created these animal spirits to bind their tribes together, in the exact same way modern business people create corporate entities to bind global workforces together today. Let's look at the French car maker Peugeot, for instance. Armand Peugeot, the actual flesh and blood man, went to a lawyer. The lawyer performed a little ritual, wrote some fancy words on a decorated piece of paper, signed it, and hocus pocus, a limited liability company was literally born out of thin air. It's exactly like a priest consecrating bread and wine. Peugeot, the company, isn't the physical factories, and it isn't the assembly line workers. It is a legal fiction that exists purely because our society collectively agrees to believe the story. Living in this kind of dual reality, the physical world of trees and lions, alongside the imagined world of nations and corporations, allowed humans to completely bypass the traffic jam of the genome. Biological evolution is agonizingly slow, but cultural evolution, it's lightning fast. We can alter our behavior overnight simply by changing the myth we believe in, just like switching from the divine right of kings to the sovereignty of the people during the French Revolution. And that really brings us to the core truth of our rise. We rule the world because we are the only animal that can cooperate flexibly in massive, massive numbers. Sure, ants can cooperate in massive numbers, but they're completely rigid. Chimps are flexible, but only in tiny groups. If you pit 50 Neanderthals against 50 sapiens, honestly, the Neanderthals might win. But 500 Neanderthals, they had absolutely no way of organizing. 500 sapiens, united by a shared myth, were an unstoppable force. This leads us to one of the most profound realizations from the entire book. The cognitive revolution is accordingly the point when history declared its independence from biology. Think about the weight of that. Everything we are, everything we have built as a species rests entirely on the fragile foundation of the stories we collectively agree to believe. So, as we wrap up this book summary, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Take a look around your life today. Look at the money sitting in your wallet. the borders of your country, the company you work for, they are all imagined realities. So which invisible fictions are controlling your life right now? And more importantly, what entirely new fictions will we invent tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.